Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining in today's webinar. I'm Shaista, your regular host for the webinar. In today's session, we will be discussing how to manage customer experience with remote operations post DOT new OSP guidelines. We will also be discussing how DOT guidelines have simplified the business operations for the BPO and contact center world in the remote working scenario, and also the challenges of running remote contact center. Just a few instructions before we get started. If you have any questions during the webinar, please type them into your question box in your Zoom control panel. I'll bring them up during the presentation, and we will also have time for question at the end as well. Well, to take us through this webinar, we have Rinoo Rajesh, Vice President, Technology Services Group and Digital Customer Experience at Conneqt Business Solution, and Sachin Bhatia, co-founder at Ameyo. Rinoo has over 20 plus years of industry experience in business development, consulting, and program management with OEMs such as Nortel and Avaya in multiple geographies. He has extensive experience in defining digital transformation roadmaps and has been helping customers to deal with the impact of digital disruption on traditional ways of doing business. Currently, he is leading business transformation services at Conneqt Business Solution. Rinoo is an IIM Bangalore alumni, a PMI certified project management professional, as well as a certified business coach. He was awarded Digital Transformation Leader of the Year. He's also a member of Leadership Council at Conneqt Business Solution Limited. Welcome, Rinoo. Sachin is co-founder and global sales and marketing head at Ameyo, a computer scientist by education and a product person at heart. Sachin has been involved in understanding needs and delivering customer engagement solution to consumer-facing companies in 60 plus countries. He believes emerging markets have unique needs and need differentiated solution. Welcome, Sachin, and over to you now.
Thanks, Shaista, and a very, very good morning to everyone. I was just thinking as the year 2020, which has been probably a lifetime experience, and we'll be telling these stories to our grandchildren. Uh, and how the hope of vaccination is coming in, and at the same time, the threat of the second strand is coming in. Interesting times indeed, but the business continues. And today we talk about a very, very relevant and contextual topic. Uh, we have a certain flow to the webinar. We want to discuss first a very interesting development that has happened in the Indian ecosystem, which is the new DOT guidelines for OSP. These were much awaited, and I think COVID accelerated it, and government has taken very clear stand on what's their view of remote and how much do they want to interfere. We're going to talk about how these guidelines impact the BPOs as well as captive contact centers point by point. These are some of the things that we have learned from our customers and talking to experts, and that is why Rinoo is also here. We'll hear his views. And once you decide to go remote, what sort of challenges are there? And then we'll briefly talk about what Ameyo has been doing in these in the remote contact center space. So before without further ado, Rinoo, first of all, thank you so much for joining in. It's a pleasure to have you on the panel. Let's talk about the guidelines. I've been in this industry for over 1.5 decades now, and it was surprising that India had taken such progressive steps on the telecom policy and had one of the cheapest mobile and then later on mobile internet in India. But some of the regulations around what is possible to do in a contact center were really, really constrained, and for good reason. I think there was a fear of losing revenue by the telcos, and voice used to be a major part, but then later on it shifted to data. But if I travel a lot, and I think some of the rules that we had were really, really archaic. But it was also a lot of momentum thing. But I think government took a very, very strong stand, and they announced the new, and this is the shortest possible draft of a guideline that could be, which says that we don't want to interfere in anything and almost everything is allowed. I mean, that's how I read it. We went in detail on these guidelines, and that is available on ameyo.com/dot. But there are three things that we clearly could see. There are no registrations or no bank guarantees required. There is very, very simple infrastructure sharing amongst OSPs and amongst one OSP's multiple branches. And then a very big step, interconnection between OSPs is now allowed, a which was not allowed at all, right? It had to be like a dedicated link between these entities. You know, when this was announced last month, how did you guys take it? I'm sure you were studying it very closely. Can you share, your views of first reactions on those guidelines, and how progressive is this?
Well, it was a very pleasant yet anticipated move. So, liberalization in the true sense for the BPO sector has obviously arrived. Uh, we, we were obviously thrilled for a variety of reasons, obviously. Not only does it afford us to do things in a much more expanded manner, as I will put it, and ability to tap various other parts of the country for talent, uh, but also more importantly, the ability to give business continuity in true sense to our customers. See, we all agree that COVID-19 was a world-changing event, right? That will have very long-lasting effects on economy. I mean, I will call it once in a generation event
Yep.
types. So while there was no doubt that the pandemic was amplifying, new technology adoption, but it has made us also learn a very hard way that technology will aid us in fighting all the future disasters. Technology is becoming a very, very core. So for us, not only this liberalization was a very pleasant and very welcome move, I'm sure the whole industry as well as smaller players who were constrained earlier will welcome this. Uh, but overall, our reaction was very, very, and to the point of being euphoric, saying, okay, finally, great.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
I think it was tweeted by the Prime Minister himself. And my first reaction was, here is a government which is clearly stating that, man, it is your business. As long as you're not doing something grossly wrong, please take care of your business. We don't want to interfere. Because there was such strict regulations about high entry barriers on starting this business, registrations, guarantees, especially if you were running a domestic and a international contact center, from the same premise. It was scrutinized, and scrutiny is not a problem, but that is then open to uh, delays, and that is where if there's no clarity, then I think business and entrepreneur always looks for clarity, right? Once there is clarity, one can work around constraints. But there was such confusion around what is allowed, what is not allowed. Is this architecture approved, not approved? And people were taking defensive stands. But I think now you will see, as in cricket, they say people will bat from the front foot, and businesses will thrive. We tried classifying the regulation change into the benefits that would actually transpire. And I will just go through a couple of them. There are five, six areas where we think uh, there will be like leaps and bounds of change, and I'm going to cover a few of them. The first one is the gross margin improvement. There was a little bit of calculation that we did, and we researched, the BPOs in India as well as in the Philippines, and we realized that infrastructure was about 25% of the agent expenditure, the infrastructure expenditure. And I'm saying cost of seat, admin, real estate, internet associated. This was about 25% of the agent cost, and agents are usually 50% of the overall expenditure. And given that the gross margins are in the 10 to 15% range, infrastructure would be another 12 to 15% range. So there is basically a upside opportunity of doubling your gross margin. Now, how you want to utilize it, whether you pass it to the customer and become more competitive, or you invest in remote methodology so that you could hire better. But there is this 15-20% gross margin which is available, which is huge for a contact center kind of business, right? Because it's a low margin business. Renu, did you guys also see similar impact when you were doing analysis? Uh, and I know that there are other areas, but on the gross margin, is that something that you foresee that gross margins would increase, which means that competitiveness would increase in this market?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, one more factor I would like to add was transportation. You know,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
transporting transporting people to our large centers. So, in a sense, yes, it is going to impact. Uh,
Mm.
However, I also believe that now that technology becomes core. I mean, it, earlier also it was very important, but once you remove the infrastructure, the physical infrastructure, the transportation, the other associated activities, share of technology slightly goes up. See,
Yes.
now there are new points on which you will spend money. For example, IT governance.
Yeah.
It has been a very large subject in itself, but it has assumed new connotations with remote uh, workforce. Right?
Yeah.
So overall, yes, there is definitely a move towards better margins,
Mm.
but at the same time, competition also intensifies in the market because now smaller players can also
Yeah.
afford things which earlier only larger players could do.
Yeah, which is what the second point is. I think ease of starting new outsourcing business. It becomes really, really easy to start, a new contact center. Though it's very competitive, and I think there has to be a niche, but at least the initial entry barriers of guarantees and licenses and those things go away, which I think is again a welcome move, which could in turn mean, uh, you know, uh, a lot of new businesses coming in and new investment coming in, whether from the small and medium or even the direct inflow from outside. We believe that because it has become easy and you can share infrastructure, right? So it is easier to recover costs. International BPOs, the ones that were coming in from outside, they were averse to entering into domestic business, though infrastructure was there. Now you would also see that happening, and hence the viability of that business increases. But I think, and I was talking to Renu the other day, I think the biggest long-term change is going to be on the kind of workforce that you bring in. And Renu had some very interesting thoughts. You can hire without constraints, guys, and that is a huge, huge paradigm shift. I mean, you needed people in the big cities. These were usually first, second jobs for the contact center agents. But I visualize that you would have a different kind of skill available. You would have more responsible people who were otherwise constrained because of locations. Think of retired professionals. Think of housewives who are skilled but cannot travel because of constraints. You can actually now utilize that workforce, which is much more mature, much more responsible, and easier to onboard. But Renu, your thoughts? I know you were thinking very, very strongly about this. What do you think will happen to the workforce, both in terms of kind of workforce and then the location?
Oh, absolutely. See, we are seeing a shift in hiring and sourcing strategies. Already, we are witnessing that. Um, the sourcing landscape is definitely expanded. It's not only geography, like you mentioned, it is the kind of talent pool that we can now tap. Uh, Differently abled people who couldn't travel for a variety of reasons, but have skills which can be good behind the keyboard and the mic, as I will put it. They are suddenly available. Uh, Senior citizens who have a lot of spare time and very polished are suddenly becoming. So these concepts of part-time workers were also earlier there, but sourcing was a problem because still we wanted everybody to travel and sit in an office and do it. Not
Yes,
everybody wants to do that.
yes,
Suddenly, this has opened up new vistas for us, for everybody, in fact. However, it has also thrown challenges because the dynamics of bringing people into an office and training them was very different than training people virtually.
yeah,
Not everybody lends themselves to digital very easily. So what we are seeing is that technology is creating seismic shifts in the mix of skills required to succeed.
mm,
It's not only being available, but at the same time, are you digitally savvy enough to take it? So interestingly, I mean, we will see in the coming months that these different segment of talent pool are now required to upskill themselves into digital skills also, because a virtual collaboration, for example, while running a successful team, does not lend itself very easily to people, except when they're, I mean, WhatsApp has helped, I guess, because now people are very, very savvy with chatting. So it will become very natural extension. But I believe the pool has expanded considerably. Um, since we are also a BPO which provides multiple languages, in fact 22 to be precise, uh, the the sourcing landscape suddenly expanded. Now we can get a person right from their native place for a vernacular service requirement, as well as having best of the breed, talent, let's say on a back office. That's becoming very easy. But
Yep,
at the
yep,
same time, we have to do this slightly differently, is what I believe.
yeah. We'll talk on the challenges, but one of the things in the guidelines is that there are a lot of interconnects which are shown, but I think one blanket exception that has been taken is if somebody is an employee, he or she can work from anywhere. That's considered an extended workforce. So even across circles, and there is still interpretation going on. So if you have an agent who is on your role and is working out of, let's say, Kerala, and your head office is in Gurgaon, the across circle problems don't apply there, right? That's only between the OSPs that you have to sort of consider that, and that's a big move again. So the whole of as long as the workforce is in India, you could actually have them as part of your infrastructure without any constraints, and that's a huge shift. I would request everybody to still interpret the guidelines, but this is one big shift that we have seen, that you could actually hire people from anywhere and they could be interconnected to your central infrastructure, which we have seen that people are simply taking cloud solutions so that anybody can log in from anywhere rather than on-premise solution. That's a huge shift. I mean, we used to do like 30% on-premise, but the model could be subscription or purchase. But today that number is 90% subscription on cloud, right? So that's a huge shift in our business, and it is attributed to that you don't know where people would be logging in from, and the government is now allowing it. Uh, okay, let's. I wanted to share one poll and a disclaimer. This poll was done prior to the OSP guideline, and we've been talking to our customers and even BPOs in general. And we went ahead and asked them, this was 3 to 4 months into the lockdown. Obviously, everybody was forced into it. But we started asking them, okay, do you think this is going to stay till pandemic only, the remote, or this is going to go back? And even before the guidelines, and we are doing another survey, post the guidelines have come in, uh, that whether remote for your company is a long-term strategy or is it short-term, or you still undecided. And 3 months into the lockdown, 43% folks had already said that no, this is long-term, and I think they could see the advantages both on the gross margin as well as some of the workforce advantages that we were talking about. 22% still felt this is short-term, and we also realize that some of the verticals are especially skeptical, uh, considering data security and privacy. I think those are the biggest constraints. And then 35% was still on the fringes. I'm sure they have taken a decision by now, so we will have different results. But let me put Rinoo on the spot. Rinoo, at CBSL, is there a clear defined strategy for the next 12 months, 24 months? What percentage will continue to work remote for you guys? And is this a long-term decision for you guys?
See, while initially there was reluctance and apprehension regarding work from home, I must say it has been taken up in a very significant fashion. See, there are three major obstacles when you're doing this: securing the infrastructure for remote work, implementing new work policies itself, and then balancing the work lives of employees. So, for us, it's been a journey which initially, obviously, because of the pandemic induced lockdowns, it was that, yes, adoption was very high. I mean, we went up from 500 to 9,000 in a matter of couple of weeks in
Wow.
terms of remote work, right? So definitely there was wide adoption. What we are also seeing is that over a period of time, this mode is lending itself to certain types of job families. So when I say job families, not exactly organizational job families, but from a customer perspective. So in my opinion, this trend of work from home is there to stay. Of course, there are challenges around connectivity, power supply. I mean, it's been there. I mean, this is India, right? While we still think that we are very well connected. I mean, if you look at the endpoints, edge devices, as I call them, a significant amount. So the trend is here to stay. What is emerging is, and it varies from industry to industry, by the way. For example, e-commerce, certain job families are saying, I'm okay, 90% work from home, no issues. A BFSI customer is naturally apprehensive. So depending on what type of process you're executing, some are okay, some are saying take hybrid. So from our organizational strategy perspective, we are definitely uh, looking at this as a long-term trend. This is not going back,
Awesome.
not the way it was.
I was
But percentages will vary.
Sorry, I was reminded of a conversation I was having with there were two webinars that we did. One was in Southeast Asia, in the Philippines, and one was in West Africa. And it's funny that you mentioned it, India. In West Africa, our situation is we do a lot of business in Nigeria, and about 60-70% of power is Gen Z based, right? And the biggest problem became that how do you make sure that the Gen Zs at the agent's location are always full with oil, and they actually tied up with somebody to make sure that there's a constant supply happening. And it was funny, but that's what it came down to. For it was the largest BPO there and very, very hard to run. And in Philippines, the biggest problem was having a 4G device available, right? Because Philippines is made up of islands, and people had moved down to their native places. The 4G coverage was there, but enough devices were not available in a locality. And a couple of agents actually started business of making sure that the supply of 4G devices is there and the prepaid is topped up. It's a prepaid economy. So there were some very interesting things in the initial challenges. But one of the things that I want to again ask you is, did you observe any shift in productivity? And I'm not talking about during the phase of stabilization. Like we experienced that we also moved about 50,000 agents at our customer locations across Southeast Asia, Middle East, Africa, remote, and they were varied experiences. Even the call volumes were higher because I think people were more anxious in the early days. But when it stabilized, do you see or let's say non-remote versus remote or physical versus remote, is there a significant shift in productivity patterns as it is?
Yes, the simple answer is yes. There is a difference. Earlier, see, in the initial months, there was a dip because you're suddenly shifting into a different way of working. However, over a period of time, uh, we have had specialized trainings. For example, how to handle the virtual world. So, for a team leader who is supervising, let's say, 20 people, earlier in a physical office space, suddenly he has to manage 20 people virtually. Now,
Yeah.
rules of the game are very different there. So we have had specialized trainings for our personnel. Specialized software also we have put. For example, collaboration suddenly has become very important word in the team management. Earlier it used to be we'll have a huddle together, we'll know what needs to be done. Now the huddle is virtual.
Yep.
So that is one area. Second is keeping people focused. So see, BPOs work in a very different manner, right? If you've been to the floor, there different way of working altogether. Now suddenly you have people dispersed across everywhere. How to keep them gold? So we have in fact from our side we have introduced specialized softwares for keeping them aware and gold together. So gamification, leaderboards, online training mechanisms, all of this. So the productivity levels are now coming up. That's how I'll put it. And in future, I'm assuming they will improve, because now there is a focus while you're working. And there's another trend which we will talk about, which is part-time workers now. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that is affording us something different.
So we went out and again objectively started talking to folks, and also understanding, because there's a lot of data that we are collecting on productivity when so many people are actually logging onto Ameyo every day. And we went out and asked folks that, once you have decided to go remote or you were forced to go remote, what are the top challenges? And some of them Rinoo has already mentioned, but I'll just go through them. The biggest challenge, and this was again at the same time, the biggest challenge was making sure that IT governance and security is taken care of. Contact center is such a tech-heavy environment that in real time. So I remember times on the floor that agent has a problem, he just raises his hand, and an IT guy would rush in to solve, or a floor manager would rush in to solve that. What's the issue? And let's say he's saying, I'm not able to do XYZ, and that issue is immediately reported and resolved. But what if he does the same thing from home? He says, I'm not able to log in. Now, do you trust the device? Do you trust the network? Or do you trust the agent? Right? There's a very, very serious issue there of how do you sort of find the root cause quickly, and not just root cause, because it's not good enough to react. If the network is an issue, what would you do? And There were steps around this that I'll talk about, but one of the things that we were able to do is, for example, monitor the device, whether it's mobile or the laptop, device memory, CPU utilization, network, and agent behavior through clicks, and see whether there's an issue with any of the parameters. And if there's an issue, yes, you report it, you flag it, but also change the routing, so that, let's say if there's a network issue happening, don't, before him reporting or her reporting, you can actually start routing and say, please check your network and stuff like that. These were not things that you needed in a physical environment, because absolutely managed infrastructure. And then on security, how do you make sure that calls are not recorded, screenshots are not being taken, because there is data privacy and stuff like that. The second issue became onboarding and collaboration. It used to be a high attrition environment, and that used to be the top problem of the industry. So every month you would have a fresh batch getting graduated, and it's a very tribal knowledge, right? People don't learn in classrooms and contact centers. They learn by the guy who's sitting next to him or her, that what do you do in such a situation? Now, how do you scale learning and bring in new people? That's a big problem. And then even the operations monitoring, right? Floor KPIs like number of calls handled, login hours, I think would not be sufficient for you to instigate behavior of performance. So can you now have, and this has been talked about a lot, but first call resolution, NPS, actually being pushed down to the floor that they are responsible. These were some of the three things that we heard, but let me bring in Rinoo. What are your observations on these three, and how did you guys go about overcoming them?
You are absolutely right about the tribal knowledge part, that played a huge role.
Yeah.
Now, suddenly we have a distributed workforce. So what we have been trying to do is condense this tribal knowledge into virtual assistants. So we have tried that, and it has some modest success. Virtual assistants for the agents. So instead of agent raising a hand or trying to tap the shoulder of employee sitting next, the first port of call is virtual assistant.
Mm-hmm.
Guide me in this situation. What should I do? What is the next best thing? It's not easy. I mean, obviously, condensing all that information takes a lot of effort. So we have specialized, roles. For example, we call them bot trainers. So earlier there used to be people trainers. We have now bot trainers who actually train virtual assistants meant for agent productivity. So that is another area that we have tried. Definitely collaboration is one area, and training and help is only a tap away. That's the way we manage this. IT security continues to be, significant area, although there have been steps taken. In my view, this is a hygiene factor which will become stabilized and recede in its importance, relative importance, in the coming months. Because like electricity, you will start taking security for granted because all of these things will become part and parcel of your standard package.
Yeah.
Then the focus shifts to collaboration, onboarding. How do you coach the new agent on the mores and chores of what he needs to do? That's where we are seeing automation also playing its part, and collaboration is definitely a big factor.
I love the bot trainer job profile, and I'm sure this is going out as a tweet as we are speaking, that now there's a new role called bot trainer. Um Renu, I absolutely agree with you. I think the initial challenge of, because there was an urgency to the infrastructure problem that became the top problem, but actual problem that needs to be solved very strategically is the onboarding and collaboration problem, because that's a long haul problem, right? You currently had a workforce which was already trained, but as you get new people, this problem will multiply manyfold. And people who have figured out how to onboard people. In fact, Ameyo, though we are not a BPO, but we have onboarded about 25, 30 new folks. For a scale of our company, that's about 10, but 5 to 10% of our scale. And it has been a journey in itself, because the onboarding used to be a very different experience. And how do you, not just onboarding, how do you inculcate those new members into the team? How do you make sure camaraderie is getting built up? Because ultimately the organization, it is the conversations that are happening in these huddles, right? These That's the culture of the organization, and you cannot afford that to be like fragmented. It has to, that fiber has to be the same, and that is what then goes out as the definition of the organization. But you mentioned about tools, you mentioned about new roles. In terms of KPIs or how you look at business, or something at the floor level, is there any shift, or is it still the same? It's just that people are running it remote. Have you seen anything new being measured in terms of productivity for the floor level?
Absolutely. Availability, but in a different manner. So earlier, mere physical presence in office was considered availability, at least from a physical presence perspective. But now we have to monitor virtual presence also. So that has also become very important factor. And of course, depending on the type of transaction being executed, there are KPIs. Those standard KPIs have become very important. Measurement has become very focused. And what is happening also is that now we are giving this information in real time to our associates, so that they also remain focused. Are you there? How are you performing against your target? How are you performing? How are you performing as a team? These things are becoming now available on the desk, rather than the board which used to be there on the floor saying, as a team, how are you performing? So all of these things, measurement remains largely same, except a few things in terms of availability, presence, but
I foresee
intensified.
what we used to call wall board would now be called desk boards, and everybody has their own view of what's happening on that virtual floor, if you can call it, because it's extremely critical. I think it used to drive behavior. If the SLA was going down, suddenly everybody was, the team leader would make an announcement, and suddenly everybody was alert. But now that has to be done at each desk, and basically self-monitored, so that that behavior is induced. But yeah, that's a very interesting change of everybody aware of how we are doing as a team, though you cannot see the other guy. Awesome. I know that we have had a association, and the pandemic sort of induced it. But can you take us through that? What went into this decision of first of all going remote, and how did Ameyo help you there?
See, going remote was more of a business necessity because the customers were asking. Now, where we found Ameyo was a elastic infrastructure, very rapid response. So that was need of the hour at that time. We had mere hours and days to react to customers because there was severe disruption happening. So like I said, we zoomed from 500 to 9,000 remote workers in a matter of couple of weeks max.
Hmm.
So obviously, we were looking for a partner who had elastic infrastructure, had a stable infrastructure, right? That is also more important. I mean, it's not merely having a partner who has an infrastructure, but a stable one, and full of the features that we required. Because to be able to manage a remote workforce, you need collaboration features. So we found all
I,
that in the platform.
I remember talking to, this was the first week into the lockdown, and we were contemplating that how would this change our business. And Vishal, our CEO, and me and the product team, we were having a chat. And there are so many things that we take for granted. So we started moving a few customers to remote, and these were earlier, the first versions were very simple solutions: take a VPN and start shifting people. And then we suddenly started realizing people didn't have workstations and laptops, right? And said, okay, this is unprecedented. We have never thought of such a situation. And then we realized that maybe the whole market is facing this problem, and can we move very fast? And I think within the first 4 weeks of the lockdown, we launched a mobile app, first on Android and then on iPhone, wherein for the first time you could actually have the complete contact center functionality happening on a mobile phone for an agent, right? So we even had agents doing predictive dialing calls on mobile phone connected to a central cloud infrastructure. And thereafter, this was, in hindsight, we took a very strong position of being a remote first, because most of our deployments were happening in large enterprises, data centers and stuff like that. We said this is going to be a remote first world, and we invested very heavily. And I think that decision really paid off. Like you gave an example of elastic infrastructure. We never had any long term contracts. We said, okay, you can move 10 agents and can move to 1,000 agents very quickly. We also were monitoring productivity, and I think the first 3-4 weeks there was a 20% shift from what we were observing in office, and then that slowly went up as we were monitoring parameters, and that proactive routing, wherein device problems, etc., were all being proactively taken care of, that what is happening. And IT was happy because they didn't have to respond to remote requests on, I'm not able to log in, right? So, okay, give me a remote desktop and stuff like that. That all went away and said, here is, you are facing a network problem. We have taken you off the queue. And if there is an issue, if this comes back, we will bring you back in the queue. In the meantime, here is the status of your network, right? All this on an agent infrastructure, which was earlier not dreamt of. But yes, I think it has been a fantastic learning. We still continue to learn. I think there are things around collaboration that we want to build on. There are things around security, like you could not take screenshots of those. There was one more interesting thing I wanted to mention. Usually contact center application is not the only application. There are also CRM applications that would get in. Now, how do you do that on a mobile phone, right? Uh, so we actually made a new kind of CTI adapter, and the inspiration was Google Maps, because Google Maps has this floating widget, and Swiggy also uses that floating widget, that you could be doing something else, but you can see the status. So now can you have the call controls in the floating widget, and you can have the backend CRM application open, right? These were all ideas from, I think, the consumer tech that we learned by using somebody like a Google Map and Swiggy, and those really, really work well for our customers. But we continue to learn it, and Rinoo, thank you for the trust in the business. There were other areas where we have discussed iMark in the last case, where uh, this was again done completely remote, and within a week I think over 1,000 agents were moved to a remote infrastructure on a separate physical cloud server, right? They had an on-prem infrastructure for the last 1.5 decade. They've been a customer for 1.5 decade, and overnight we shifted them to a cloud infrastructure. The same for our customers in the Philippines. This is a collection agency, and completely on mobile agent app in the beginning, and then on the productivity side. Uh, this some stuff about Ameyo, but I wanted to share a couple of things that we talked about. For example, the 15 infrastructure parameters: network, device, memory. You don't want your IT to be spending time on those and reacting to those. You basically want to make sure that IT is always aware right? So the contact center infrastructure is actually now there is a bring your own device methodology. How do you make sure that the device is good enough or is at this moment in a correct state to handle a call or an interaction, right? Is there availability? Is the network okay? You can't be reacting, because if you start reacting, then the drops and the infrastructure stability cannot be assumed, right? You even broadband. I have two broadbands at home, and still there are possibilities that both of them are not working at the same time. I can't wait for my IT to take action on those. So the second is uh, the single view of the operations, like the wall board. As I said, you can now have it on the desk. You can embed it in the supervisor or the agent application, so that they are aware of whatever key KPIs. This is configurable. Whatever key KPIs you want to show them or change behavior on. Gamification is something which is this can be exposed to, and then you say that which teams are doing better and stuff like that. This is the example I was talking about. Is a Salesforce app, and this is the floating widget of Ameyo on a mobile app. We never dreamt such a day would happen, that you could have a contact center call with a CTI pop-up happening on a mobile phone. But I think with our partners, even Salesforce helped us on how do you make sure that even a pop-up can happen, right, within their app, from the app which is outside, running as a floating widget, right? And then I think OSP came in and WebRTC became a reality. So in India, the other problem was you needed two call legs if you wanted to terminate call on a mobile phone. But now you can actually do it on WebRTC. So WebRTC means that you don't need any infrastructure or a telco infrastructure to terminate a call. And with OSP, you can now, from the cloud, you can directly terminate it on agent's mobile phone using IP network. And that's allowed now. And we are doing this on our public cloud also. Yeah, some of the screenshots here. And yeah, I mean, as I said, we've taken 50,000 agents to remote, and doing more every day, and building products and applications, learning from our customers ahead of the market. Our positioning now is a remote first contact center. So if any of you have thoughts around it, please have a chat with us. There are a few questions, Rinoo, that the audience has asked both in their forms, and some of them have been collated. Let me take them one by one. How do you ensure client has full visibility of productivity in a WFH environment? Uh, from a client perspective, I think the still the same reports, and if you can give it in real time, it is even better. But what we have learned is that the business reporting has not changed much. So from a BPO to a client, the reporting, and it should be as seamless. The client cares less if you're running remote, or it doesn't matter, right? They finally want a certain KPI. But Rinoo, your thoughts on this? Has anything changed on how you report to your customers?
No, the customers still want the same. How many associates are there? What is their performance, availability,
Yeah.
quality?
Yeah.
So in that sense, it is not much changed. Obviously, the delivery of this information has slightly differed,
Mm.
enhanced, I would say.
Mm.
So in a sense, the business KPIs don't change. They remain same.
Sure.
Yeah, of course. Now we have much more visibility on an individual level also, and
Mm.
it is available.
Sure. Second and third are about new regulations of providing hosted contact center services if you're not a service provider. And can I provide a technology service to BPO or customer on a hosted infrastructure? The answer to both of them are yes. If you are, so for example, when Ameyo is doing on its public cloud, there's still a question of who owns the telco resources. In case of Ameyo, and with a full disclaimer that we are taking a forward-looking call here, we own the telco infrastructure, and we are okay, because as an interconnect is allowed, we just need to take care of the circles here still, because it's across OSPs, right? So if I'm an OSP, and let's say you're a small BPO and you're an OSP, what sort of interconnection is allowed is something that we still take care of. So we have data centers in various circles, but we are giving it from the public cloud now, even on WebRTC. And as I said, from the essence of the regulation, we don't see that to be a challenge at all. But do talk to our consultants if you're looking at something like this. Can you provide a technology BPO on a hosted? Yes, the answer to that is yes. And most of them are on both either public hosted or even a managed hosted, depending on the scale. and the data security requirements that one has. Can a non-voice international OSP share common resources? Yeah, that is very categorically stated. Any thoughts on that? You guys are doing both domestic and international. Infrastructure sharing is now clearly allowed, right? I don't see any challenge as long as you're not. The only responsibility is don't bypass toll, right? That's the only
Absolutely.
responsibility. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
In
Do we
fact,
need it?
I
Yeah,
think it mentions non-voice. So that certainly should not be a problem as long
yeah,
as you're maintaining the boundary.
yeah. Yeah, I'm saying even in case of voice, as long as you're not bypassing toll. So, for example, let's say an international call comes in and you are routing it outside of your office premise, that might be considered. When I'm saying office premise, now remote work is considered office premise, right? So, if you're routing it to somebody else, that is a gray area. But if it's your employee, should not be an issue. Do we need to
Correct.
set up a peer-to-peer link? Can we look at cheaper mode of connecting two cities? Still a wide open area. Are you guys setting up private infrastructure between your various locations, or is it okay to have something like VPN on IP to do this?
From a security point of view, we are doing this as a P2P.
Yeah. But
So
from a regulation standpoint, I don't think that is necessitated right now between OSPs. Interconnect is allowed. If you're doing it from international to India, I think it still says that you need a dedicated P2P connection, is what I could interpret. But within the country, as long as it's your own premise or your own infrastructure, even now between two OSPs in the same circle, should not be an issue. Uh, Again, guys, as I said, I'm taking forward-looking calls basis the intent of the regulation. Please do check. Uh, Ameyo interpreted it very, very liberally that the government actually doesn't want to interfere as long as you don't bypass toll. That's the only interpretation we took, and that's, as I said, a forward-looking call with what the when they have gone away with the license itself, right? There's ultimately there will be no term called OSP. Remember that, right? This OSP is because there was a license. If there's no license, then what is an OSP? So as long as you're not bypassing toll, it should be okay. Remote work from home solution on VoIP, yes, it is absolutely possible now. You could terminate a call on a cloud infrastructure and take it over IP to your agent. It is absolutely okay as long as it's your infrastructure and your agent. If it is across OSPs, then it's still allowed if you're in the same circle. Concepts and trending in remote working. We have already covered a lot of those, and I'm sure you will be reading. We will be sharing a blog on what we learned today very soon. I would also request you to go through the ameyo.com/DOT webinar. We had two gentlemen sharing their playbook on how they went remote, and today we had Rinoo sharing that. So that'll be very useful. If there are no more questions, we are well on time. Uh, yeah, thank you so much, Rinoo. Once again, thank you for joining us. If there are questions, Shaista, on the panel, just let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to chat with Rinoo for a while here. Very interesting times. As I said, I'll be speaking to you, separate from this also to learn what all can we do to bring in more acceleration in remote and facilitate remote better. It's our commitment that we're going to be a remote first solution. But very interesting times. I also wish and pray that the second strand of the virus is not as deadly, and we are sometimes able to do this physically, meeting people, with friends and families. Wishing everybody a very, very happy New Year uh, and a safe time, guys. Stay safe. It's critical to be safe right now. Any last minute thoughts from your end?
well, like you mentioned, stay safe and have a happy holiday season. And thank you very much for having me here.
Thank you so much, and thanks, marketing team for organizing this. Thanks, Shaista, and
Thank you,
everybody.
Sachin.
Yeah, everybody have a good day. Take care. Bye bye.
Thank you, Sachin. Thank you, Renu.